Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Julie Lytle, the Director of Distributed and Lifelong Learning at Bexley Seabury Seminary in Chicago, and we're glad to see you for tonight's conversation. Janet Tidwell is going to be hosting our conversation, looking at some new ideas about the beloved community as our way of thinking about how we can be in relationship with one another, and she's got lots of great resources to share. This is part of our series called Deacons Talking on the Road to Emmaus. It's a web-based video series designed as a way for us as deacons to talk with one another, hopefully animating and supporting our ministries and being able to share ideas that can be replicated. It's inspired by today's scripture, which was about the road to Emmaus, where the disciples were walking along and didn't realize that Jesus was in their midst. But his presence was able to release their fear and to be able to help them experience the resurrection as a sign of new life. And we're hoping that these stories will be a way to inspire new life for you as we're serving our communities. Please remember that we are being recorded, and we will post the recording on the province1.org website shortly after. We'll also send a link to you all who have registered, along with any of the handouts that we will be sharing on the screen and the links to the videos that Janet is going to be sharing. We're hopefully going to be able to share those videos without any interruption, and it will be best if you can keep your systems on mute until we invite you to talk with us. There is a chat screen, which if you look down at the bottom, there should be a bar that says chat. Feel free to comment back and forth with each other, as well as to post any questions you want to make sure that I can bring up to Janet before we open it up for everybody to have time for interaction. So Janet, without any further ado, thank you for joining us, and please introduce yourself and get us started.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Julie. I am very, very pleased to be here, and hello, fellow deacons. So good to see you. Let's start with prayer, because that's where we need to be. So here we go. This is from our own Episcopal prayer book, and it's for the human family. Let us pray. Oh God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us, unite us in bonds of love, and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I am privileged to be here with you, and I want to start out the presentation with a story, a personal story. Growing up in Detroit, Michigan, I loved to dance. I started taking dance when I was 5 years old at the recreation center because we couldn't afford dance lessons. So I have loved it. At about the age of 12 or 13, a group of 6 of us went to a square dance at a local church. It's a very large church. There were 6 of us. We went. We were the only African Americans in that building at the time, and they started the square dancing. Well, you know that squares take 8 people. In order to really do a square dance, you need 8 people. We only had 6. So we just sat there, and we were just waiting, kind of for somebody to say, come join us. We didn't get up and ask anyone to join us, but we just sat there. And we sat there for at least an hour, and nothing. Others were dancing, not us. Finally, after about 15, 20 minutes, after an hour, the 2 women who were in charge of this Girl Scout dance came over to us and said, you all might as well leave. Nobody is going to dance with you at all. We were crushed. and we left not saying a word to each other and went back to our homes. This incident has been on my mind and in my heart for 60 years. It's been that long, and I still remember it vividly. Being African American or a person of color in this country has been difficult, but there are ways that we can improve that. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Understanding, for racial healing. It used to be racial understanding, for racial healing. And it really is something that I have been involved with for well over, 12 to 15 years now. When I first moved to Georgia from, let's see, where was I at that time? I was in Wisconsin, and I moved here. There was something going on in Macon, Georgia, and it was called, that was the Center for Racial Understanding. I've been an Episcopalian all my life, and I've started going to the Episcopal Church in Macon. We did something called Study Circles on Race, and it was a 6-week program where we got to know people. There were groups, and it was as diverse as we could get it. We talked about similar things. You know, we're all human beings. We talked about those things, and we talked a lot about them, then decided what we could do. During that series, I met a woman called Dr. Catherine Meeks. Catherine Meeks and I got to know each other very well, and I was invited to join something called the Anti-Racism Commission. And the meetings were held at the cathedral in Atlanta. I went there, and we kept saying to each other, I don't like that terminology, anti-racism. It just doesn't feel right. We talked about that for years. And eventually, the Anti-Racism Commission under Dr. Meeks and her guidance was able to be changed to Dismantling Racism, the Beloved Community, becoming the Beloved Community. And that's what we have strived to do. Come a long way since those days. I'm going to talk about a video, and hopefully we can see it maybe now, about the center, the work of the center. And I want to tell you just a little bit before we see it. It's an intergenerational, faith-based organization providing curriculum activities and experience to all participants to engage their heads and their hearts in the daily work of dismantling personal prejudice and ending systemic racism. The mission is to provide tools and experiences that allow faith communities and larger community of individuals to engage in dismantling racism through prayer, dialogue, pilgrimage, and spiritual formation. I was involved in human resources, and I did a lot of training in anti-racism. Those things had minimal effect. When Catherine and I talked and members of the commission talked, we said, it's not just a training about anti-racism. It has to be a spiritual formation, and it has to be engaged with the head and the heart. So that's what we did, and came up with some goals. And the goals were basically to establish and promote a national model for dismantling racism. So let's see, that would be, 2 years ago now. The Center for, the center opened, okay? And it is just a work of great enthusiasm for us, and God filled the things that we're doing there. And I'm going to tell you about those things. But first, let's see if we can watch a quick 3-minute video about the opening.
And how we live. That's the only way we'll make progress.
I hope that you were all able to see that, and that it made some sense to you. That was the grand opening of the center 2 years ago. And we were very, very privileged to have not only Rob Wright, our deacon of the Diocese in Atlanta, but we also had Bishop Curry, presiding Bishop Curry was there. And the other bishop that was there was Bishop Victor Atabafo from Ghana. And I had met Bishop on a pilgrimage that we went to Ghana a few years ago. And he wanted to be with us when that center opened. It was a glorious day. What we do in our training is a little bit different from the usual anti-racism training. We begin with our baptismal covenant. And we all know about the baptismal covenant because we all say to it, I will with God's help. And that is what we talk about. I will with God's help. Striving for justice and peace among all people, and respecting the dignity of every human being. So that's where we started, and that's where we are today. That's the way that we also begin our training. We have trainings, gosh, there are not enough of us doing the trainings. We train in teams, and the teams is usually a person of color and a Caucasian person. We do that, that's done purposefully. We do it in teams, and we always begin with the Eucharist, because that's what binds us together. So we start with that, and we do something called, they have a card. People who are attending have a card, an index card. On one side they put hopes, on the other side they put concerns. One, for what they're feeling that particular day. They put those cards in a basket, and we mix them up, and then we pass them around, and then we can get a real idea as to why people are there and what they hope to get from it. Sometimes we do have people that say, I'm here because I have to be. I'm a vestry member, or I'm on a search committee. We have to be here. By the end of the day, we get some comments, and we allow people to make comments at the very end of the day. And many times I have heard those people say, I was told I had to be here, but I'm so very glad that I did. I now have some tools that I can use when I go back to my parish to talk about racism, systemic racism. I also have tools that I can look within myself. And I think that's the really important part. First, look within yourself. Take a mirror and say, what are my feelings about people who are different from me? Have I grown up with some things that I'm not really proud of? I know I have too. But you deal with those things. You look yourself in the mirror and say, yes, this has been a part of my upbringing, but I also know what Jesus Christ said about loving one another, and that we are all brothers and sisters in the human race. So we do that, and then we get involved in a lot of different activities where people have to bring up stories about what they've experienced in life. And we make sure that it is a safe place to say what you want to say, making sure that people understand you don't go back and you talk about these things, that these stories you've heard. There's a level of confidentiality that is maintained. And we really try to do that. And I'll tell you, some of the stories are gut-wrenching. Things people had forgotten that happened in their lives. And these are Black, white, brown, yellow people, all kinds. They'd forgotten about things that have weighed heavily on their hearts, but now they are able to speak it, and someone is listening to it. We have an exercise where one side of, they're lined up together facing each other. You all may have done something like this before, where people are lined up, sitting very, very close to one another, on knees almost touching, and we ask questions. One side has to listen, the other side responds, and then it's reversed, where that side listens and the other responds. People get to know each other as people, not as that Black man, that Hispanic woman, that white woman over there. We are people. We all feel the same things. So that exercise is one of the ones that people love, and they want to say, can we take that exercise back to our churches, our communities, and share it? And we say, sure, everything that we do is shareable. No copyrights on things, okay? The exercises are for everybody. One of the things that we have to provide in this brave space is the courage really to say what it is that we are feeling. And that actually does happen. We want to talk about truth in a brave space, a brave, safe space. So that's exactly what we do. All of our things, our exercises are available to people that, if any of you would want to know something about them, they are available. The website, Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing, is available to anybody who wants to go to it. We're also on Instagram, and feel free to take a look at what's there. There's a monthly newsletter that comes out. You can access also to tell you about the activities at the center. About, it would be maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had a project here in Georgia that dealt with remembering those people in Georgia who had been lynched. And I know that many of you know Brian Stevenson and what he's done in Alabama regarding lynchings. But we started ours on a diocese level. The first year, we looked at the area where I live. I live in Warner Robins, Macon, Georgia area. We looked at that area and found the names of 17 people who had been lynched in the area. We went to the city council, asked permission to put up a marker in front of the historic Douglas Theater. The Douglas Theater was owned by a Black man. He was a millionaire at the time. And he opened this for Black people because Black people couldn't go to the Grand Opera House at the time. He opened it there. And what happened at this center was a man in Macon was killed. A Black man was killed. And his body was thrown in front of the Douglas Theater so that, it'd be to scare the rest of you Black people. Well, we wanted to establish a monument of those names in that place. And that's the first year that we did it. When we went to the city council to ask about got to get permission basically to put that memorial in that front of the theater, there were some comments that said, why do you want to bring this up now? This is a thing of the past. He said, no, it's not. It's not a thing of the past. We may not be lynching people as such, hanging them from trees, but it's happening, we know, in other forms. Other forms being mass incarceration. That happens. So we did that one. The second year, we went to Athens, Georgia, and we found more names. At that time, I think about 57 names we found, and we put up a marker there, larger marker, in front of actually it is in front of a one-room schoolhouse that was for slaves. And it's in existence, it's a historical marker now. So we put that marker there. Then the third year, we put a marker at the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing in Atlanta. On that one, we had 600 names. And we know that that doesn't even come close to what the actual number of people who were lynched. Men, women, children were lynched in Georgia. They had been doing that several years before in Alabama with the Jonathan Daniels pilgrimage. We attended that and still attend that one regularly also. Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy, and he established in Montgomery the lynching memorial. And if you haven't been there, I would strongly urge you to go if you have the opportunity. There is a legacy museum and the lynching memorial, two different sites, but they're fairly close to each other. Something that brings a lot of attention to what has happened in this country regarding racism. So we do that. We also have had the pilgrimage to Ghana. That's where the first pilgrimage to Ghana that I was privileged to go and be a part of. We've had 2 others since then, and we've established a relationship with the Diocese of Cape Coast, and that's where Bishop Victor Atabafo is from. So we regularly meet with them. We hope to take a group of young people there soon. I don't know if it'll be this year, hopefully maybe next year. Not many of us are traveling anywhere right now, but that's going on. So we have pilgrimages. We've established when I say we, I'm talking about the center. We have established memorials to lynching victims. There's a Province 4 justice pilgrimage that was held last year, where representatives from all over the Province 4 came to Atlanta for a week, and they talked about race. They went to Savannah and visited some of the slave markets there and some other places, came back, and it was determined this is not about going someplace for the sake of going someplace. What are you going to do after? So they talked about really ways that they were going back to their individual parishes and dioceses and talk about what they had experienced there and come up with a plan for dealing with issues of race in their place. Then they were supposed to come back this year. I don't know if all the people were coming back, but a lot of them. We had good representation from the states that are in Province 4. So that happened. That's going to continue. We also did the Tutu project. Let's see if you can see it. The Tutu desks. This is what children in South Africa, let's see if I can get it. South Africa carry with them to school. They walk to school. They don't have desks, but they have these that they can write on and do all kinds of activities, but mainly write on. And we were involved in that project a couple of years ago to send as many Tutu desks to South Africa for the children to use. And there were thousands, tens of thousands that went there. So we were involved in that project. In addition to the training that we do, now we've been fortunate enough to be asked by other states to do some training. And I went for a weekend to Kentucky and did some training there. So it's just been a marvelous experience. And I'm going to tell deacons, you all, how you can be involved, not necessarily with the center, but we certainly would like you to be, but what you can do at your own parish, in your own diocese, what you can do to achieve reconciliation. And I know it's going on in some places because I know Jan Grinnell and I know what's going on in Rhode Island. So if that's a wonderful thing. One of the big initiatives that we did was develop a curriculum for children, sixth through 12th grades. And that was, let's see, 2 years ago now, that curriculum was developed. It was tested first for the first year. And I know we did it at the parish in Warner Robins last year. And I don't know if, Julie, can you pull up that video?
Sorry, say which one it is again?
Youth curriculum.
Oh, you mean the scan?
Well, there's that, but there's a video also. Let's see if I can tell you. It's not calling their names. It's the other one. That's it.
I definitely haven't had the same problems that people of other races or ethnicities have had growing up. You know, if I'm walking around like Midtown at night, I'm not necessarily concerned for my safety, or if cops see me and think I'm doing something suspicious, or if I get in trouble for something at school, I think it would be handled differently than if I was of a different race.
I was in a music class in elementary school. It was about first grade or kindergarten, but I was sitting down on the floor with all the other students, and I was sitting with my legs out, and you know how you put your hands behind you, and my hand accidentally hit one of this girl's shoes, and she raised her hand really quick and told the teacher that I had rubbed some black on her. And that really, I didn't think of too much of it at the time, but that still replays in my head, and it really makes me think.
I think it's almost the definition of white privilege is just you're able to live with this ignorance, sometimes not even your fault, but you just don't know what these other people have to go through and how easy you really do have it. And people than a different race than you don't have to walk into a new group and be worried that they will just judge you off of your skin color.
As I got older and started to realize that being black in America is probably one of the most terrifying things, you start to learn, like, what happens if I'm one of those people who are getting pulled over? Like, who are they to assume, like, just because I'm half black, that I'm gonna try to kill them, or I'm more violent than anyone else?
The assumptions that are made about people when you walk into a group for the first time are much more likely to be positive assumptions than my friends and colleagues that are not white. So to be white in America means that we don't have some of the same barriers that non-white people have.
I'm either supposed to be really into hip-hop, or I'm supposed to be that I should be incarcerated, or I should be playing sports. I think a lot of times the question that's always asked by people who I meet is, did you play basketball in high school or in college? And the answer is always no. At 6'2", I would be one of the shortest people on the team. So I don't think that I would be extremely successful at basketball. Or are you saying that only because I'm black and because you assume that all black people have to be in the NBA or have to have played some sort of basketball at some point in their life? I think that being part of a majority, a mostly non-black church also means that people will ask me what it's like at HBCUs or at black churches as though I grew up at the AME church instead of at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church in Snellville, Georgia.
It's just really important to speak up for what you think, and even if you're not affected by racism directly, you need to stand up for those that are, and like take advantage of your privilege to like have your voice heard for people that need to be stood up for. And like if you're white in America, you're in a place of privilege, and so you need to use that privilege and those opportunities that you get to make a difference for other people who don't have that same opportunity.
You just talk to people, and you just like, if everyone just like learns each story like back and forth, and every race just like comes together and talks about it, including myself and my friends. And I think that that's how you can solve racism everywhere. If everyone just talks about what everyone else thinks of the other race.
They have the fear of really stepping in and saying some stuff or standing up against, people maybe being racist or that sort of thing. It could be just, your friends making a racist joke, and it's, it's your friend, and it's something you can easily just, you don't necessarily agree with, but you could just say nothing, or you could just kind of let it by. You don't want things to get uncomfortable. But I mean, you could just be like, that's not cool, that's racist.
When I hear language that is disparaging about groups of people, when I hear commentary that is clearly stereotypical and perpetuating racist ideology, I have to speak up. It is part of not feeling guilty about my privilege, but understanding that my privilege requires that I speak up and take a stand when I hear or observe other racist behaviors.
Me being biracial, so I have some of the genetic pool from the Caucasian race and some from the African American race, and I really think that I can use that for the better to kind of bring out the key positive factors of both races and use that to help people kind of get along and just mediate everything.
Thanks, Julie. I hope everybody could see that. I wanted to tell you that the curriculum, again, is for 6th to 12th graders. And we are also working just in the very beginning on a curriculum for younger children, because a lot of these feelings have come about and beliefs come about at early ages. The Dismantling Racism curriculum is a 6-lesson curriculum. It can be done in 6 lessons, say if you're doing a Sunday school or a youth evening, it can be done over 6 weeks, or it can be done over a weekend. And that's the way I was a part of one that was over a weekend. It's intense. It starts on Friday night and will end on Sunday. So they were really the students were locked in. The lessons cover, Julie, can you pull up that handout so people can see what the lessons are that are covered?
I think. Where did it go? There we go. The right place here. Which one do you want to start with?
Not that one.
The other
Not
one?
that one.
The youth one?
Yes, that one.
Does it need to be bigger?
If you can, yes. If not, I can certainly read it.
Oh, I've got a problem here, sorry. Technical difficulties.
I'll tell you all what
Here we go.
There's 6 lessons, And it started with the introduction, started with the covenant between God and humans. And then the next one deals with God as the artist, making all different God made us all beautifully different. And that one talks about witnessing the beauty of diversity. The third lesson is the history of racism in America, how we got here. That one, in the group that I was with, created a fantastic amount of conversation by the youth, because I had a timeline, and the timeline was, over a long, was across a whole wall. And students got to see what events took place in this year or in that year, starting at 1619. I think that's where recognized last year, the first slave ship to come to the United States. They got really interested in that history. The fourth lesson is white privilege. The fifth lesson, internalized oppression. This one also got a lot of conversation going between the students. We didn't have a lot of African-American students, but there were some. There were also Asian students that were in this group, and talked a lot about the effects of racism, like the story that I told in the beginning about my square dance experience. That was talked about there. And also the last lesson is repentance, healing, and reconciliation. This is all fairly new, but I wanted to read to you what one of the students wrote after. They keep a journal, and after she wanted to share this out of her journal. She said, "On this weekend journey to dismantle racism, I've learned more about our nation's history than at school, but this experience wasn't bad nor negative. We talked about racism in a transformative way, shining light on old wounds and finding different ways to heal them. I learned about so many different cultures and how they are all beautiful in their own way. But we were also informed about how deeply ingrained racism, oppression, and inequality is in our day-to-day society. Mm-hmm. This program will open up the doors to my and future generations of white children and children of color for a perfectly equal society and knowing how to make a difference." That was written by a 14-year-old. Mm. I have another, there's another one that talks, that a 13-year-old wrote. And they get so much out of this. Things that they talk about things that they have not talked about at home. And they get to talk with each other, which is very, 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 very good for them. And for the adults who attended. We had some parents who were part of it also. And I think that's important. We make sure that before we start any kind of training with the young people, that their parents are engaged and know about this up front, because you will have a lot of parents who are kind of a little leery about what's going to be talked about. So we involve them in every step all along the way.
Janet, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I have at least one question that's coming from the floor. Robin was asking, do you have a hybrid version of this, or is there have you talked about at all ways of trying to do the training in ways that might be more accessible than having it all tightly packed in a weekend?
No, we haven't. I mean, it's almost still like in a transformative stage right now. We have not done that. We decided to do it in this city over the weekend because we know we could have the kids and they weren't going to go anywhere. If you do it on successive Sundays or in successive weeks, you may have some attend this session, and may have some attend the other session. And we really have not at this point made a comparison of which seemed to work better.
Okay. With time getting short, are there other questions that folks would like to bring to the table? I guess not.
Jan has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Go ahead.
I know you said that you went to Kentucky to do something. If transportation, et cetera, was provided, are you or someone from the center available to bring that curriculum to another diocese?
We have not talked about that yet. I know when I went to Kentucky for the actual, to do the actual training there for adults, yes, we were, there were two of us, a Black woman, white man, two of us that went, and we were compensated, and also travel was compensated by that diocese, by the Diocese of Kentucky. Does that answer your question, Jan?
If those kind of arrangements could be made to do this program.
I didn't hear the question.
Jan, why don't you type into the box? We're having a hard time hearing you.
Let's try that. I changed my microphone. Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay, I keep forgetting I have to, when I go on my monitor, I have to change. So the question is, Janet, if we could pay for you to come, another trainer to come, et cetera, and give you compensation, whatever the financial thing is, would you be able to come to Rhode Island as an example to do this presentation for a weekend for a group of youth?
We haven't been asked that at this point, and I would have to really talk it through with Catherine Meeks. I don't know, if nobody's ever asked that at this point, so it would have to be a discussion with her first. She's very particular about how training goes in terms of what exactly is the diocese prepared to do as a result. She is very clear about this, and she doesn't want simply for us to be going out, sharing this, and it not being done in a way that integrates what is going on in the Diocese of Atlanta with, say, the Diocese of Rhode Island. So that would have to be discussed with her first, but I certainly can have a discussion and get back to you. Of course, now nobody's traveling anywhere. So we're probably talking about next year at the earliest.
Well, and I'm also not a spokesperson for the diocese.
Yeah, and I am I.
I know, but I tend to get myself in trouble like that.
That's what deacons are supposed to do, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Disturbance.
Okay, do we have any other questions before I want to get that last part about what deacons can do?
Go for it.
Okay, and this will be, there's a handout here, but I want to talk first about checking your own personal attitude, biases, prejudice first. I think that's very important to know yourself before going out and talking to anyone. And then go out and just talk with people. That's one of the things that Study Circles on Race did. We went out and engaged each other and set aside time to do that. I think they were hour 15-minute sessions, and they always lasted longer. When people get started, they last much, much longer. So that's where we get to know each other as people, not as a stereotype that somebody said let's say for me, that's a stereotype that I was. And like one of the people in the video on the youth curriculum, you know, you're a member of the AME church and you should play basketball. Stereotypical language. But when you get together and talk to one and each other, dialogue with one and each other, you get to know each other as human beings. And you probably have more in common, which I found, I had more in common with people who did not look like me. So engage in the conversation. And then we can do the handouts now. I prepared a couple of handouts for you. And I know Julie's going to make these available. But one of them talks about the dominant white culture behaviors holding racial barriers in place. And there's some bullet points there. Conflict avoidance. I don't want to cause any trouble. The right to comfort. There it is. Valuing a formal education over life experience. You know, we tend to do that. The right to comfort and entitlement. And you can read several of those. And on one side, I don't want to rock the boat. On the other side, I'm comfortable getting honest feedback. Okay? I mostly value intellect. I mostly value intuition. Okay? I feel a sense of urgency and a need to fix things. I like to slow down and see how conversation initiatives unfold. So those are some things that you can use and internalize and say, hey, I wonder about that. Is that really how I, as a white person, am holding racial barriers in place? And then the other handout is one that conversation starters. And I bet many of you know these, so it probably is redundant, but they're conversational starters and that have nothing to do with identifying persons by where they're from, where they work, or any other sorting or ranking criteria, such as personal passion, project they're working on, anything exciting that's happened and that they expect to happen. Those are starters. You can start a conversation. You can help people who may be a little bit fearful of starting a conversation with someone. I know I've had people ask me about what do you, I'm nervous. They said, I'm nervous because I don't know what to refer to you as. I don't know what's comfortable for you. Do I refer to you as Negro, Black, African American? And they'll say, I'm concerned about that with other people. And I tell them, here's what I'm comfortable with. But that's me. If you go out and you talk to other people who are people of color, ask them. They will tell you what they're comfortable with. You don't have to be an authority on what to call that person, and you might learn a thing or two. Then the next part talks about conversational stoppers. If you want to stop some conversations, use some of those. One-upping, of course, trying to fix things, responding with absolutes, overreaching, defensiveness. Okay? Then the last part talks about some things that you can keep the conversation going. When you find out those mutual interests. Listening is extremely important. And elaborate. If somebody says to you something and you say, oh, tell me more about that. You get to know the person. And that's going to go a long way in dealing with racism. That is there. Oh, there's also, I do want to mention this, and probably you know of it. The 10 10 lesson program from the Episcopal Diocese, from the Episcopal Church called Sacred Ground. I think some of you may know about that. Katrina Brown, of course, from Rhode Island, and Stephanie Spellers have put that together. That's available on the Episcopal Church's website. And there are 10 lessons there, 10 lessons that you can go through, which is a good one. But we can do more. As deacons, we can speak out and we can speak up a lot of times when a priest cannot. And I totally understand that. I'm not being compensated. My church is not being compensated by parishioners. So I don't have to be, they have to be careful. And I understand it. Deacons do not. We can say some things and say some things in sermons that maybe the priest cannot say. And I can say these things because Bishop Robert Wright has he's got our backs. He knows what we're supposed to be, stirring it up. So that, I'm comfortable in that. Now, I don't know what your individual bishops might feel about that, but in terms of the Diocese of Atlanta, he's got our backs. So we can stir it. We can and we should stir it up. Jan Grinnell talks about getting, maybe getting in trouble. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. And if you can do it with your bishop support, and always with Jesus Christ as our example. I mean, Jesus Christ was political, okay? He wasn't partisan, but he was political. And he did get angry, and he did turn some tables over, as you know. And yes, he was crucified for that. Martin Luther King was killed for that. But we have to make our voices heard. It's just absolutely have to do it. And
at the risk of going over a minute or two, I'm curious. We have a question from Marilyn asking, what are examples of what people have done? And I'd be curious to hear from the deacons that are here. Are there things that you've been doing in terms of racial reconciliation in the beloved community that you could name and share with everybody? We'd love to hear that in the chat if anyone has a chance.
Well, I am muted myself. This is
there you go. Thanks, Emma.
Well, I've been working with Latinos in Spanish with what I call being the comunidad amada, the beloved community, and continue being the beloved community instead of converting yourself, because in the translation of that, it rejects the belovedness. People don't want to hear you're becoming beloved, whatever. We are beloved. So then, as I heard the bishop from Africa, he said, creating the beloved community. And I heard in the group that I work with the implementation of the beloved community, I heard building the beloved community instead of becoming. That's theologically I don't know, it doesn't go with Latinos. So what I've done, and Catherine, she came to see that being done in Panama in 2017, where I was the person who did it. I am Emma, and I'm a deacon in the Diocese of Massachusetts. So I've been doing the work following the 4 quadrants of the beloved community. And I saw in the program that you have for the youth that you went through practically some of the 4 quadrants with the baptismal covenant. And as you say, when you put the history where we came from, what happened, that's the most incredible thing that we can do with our Latino communities. And my idea is to ask them, before you come to this, which is also a Friday night to a Sunday, try to remember what were you taught about the conquest, the slavery, and the colonial times, your history. And I'm dealing here in Panama, there were 6 countries. Province 9 has 6 Latino countries. And in the Dominican Republic, it was Haitians and Dominicans. And then in Virginia, where I went to do it with this, we had 14 nationalities, Latin American nationalities.
That's great.
So it was unbelievable, the stories that came out. Then we talk about, so they get to know each other because there's plenty of time for groups, for talking. And then we talked about what is our identity really, because of the colonial times. Then what did we learn? And then I use visions, as I can see that you use visions there, you know, in the forest.
Like you've got a great connection with things that are taking some from what the Absalom Jones Center is doing. And some
I've been doing this for a long time, and you know it. But okay,
unfortunately, we're at the end of our night, and we need to be able to wrap it up. Janet, was there anything else that you have to share with us?
No, that's the basic. Those were the basic things. But I wanted to talk about unity, and this is real quick. Unity. Right now, we need unity against the common enemy. That the virus is not only these people or those people, it's all of us. And I think it's going to bring us together. I could tell you a story about a neighbor, but I'm not going to do that. I don't have time right now. But I would like to end with some words from a hymn. And I'm sure you know this one, but I got the idea when I was in Rhode Island at the Triennial, because basically the topic was hope. So, you know, oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Be thou our guide while life shall last. Those words keep me going with hope. We've got to have hope, and we can change the world. Yeah. Each of us can do it and attain racial reconciliation. So thank you all for attending and listening.
Thank you, and say hello to Catherine from Emma.
Thank you so much.
Please, I want to add my thanks to Janet for being able to share so much of her story and the practices that she's bringing from Atlanta, and to all of you for being a part of this night with us. As I've said before, there's always more that we could be talking about, and I hope that these conversations continue amongst yourselves and with your communities. This program has been recorded. If you want to share that with anyone, you can go to the province1.org website under the Deacons Ministries, and there's a whole collection not only of tonight's program, but of all of the Deacons speakings that have been going on now for over 4 years. So we're grateful for everything that you do, and look forward to seeing you again either at the special topics on the pandemic on April 20th, or next month when the third Thursday we'll be continuing the conversation with another deacon.
Okay.
Godspeed to all of you.
Thank you. Take care. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Great evening.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you, Janet.
There's Maureen. Bye, Maureen. Thanks a lot, Julie.